I mean, you're literally bringing, in my opinion, I think you're bringing in the most all around, the best linebacker potentially that was injured all season, and now he gets a chance, hopefully, to play. And that's a huge injection. And then there, like you said, there's the domino effect that if he's going to be the starter, what does that do for everybody else? And I think JD made a case last season that he needs to be on the field. I mean, you can't double up the next closest guy in tackles by accident.
He played poorly in the last game, and that's what
agreed.
That's the I mean, how you finish is kind of that's the vibe you leave people in the offseason.
Sure.
But again, we can't dismiss the fact that in his first year as a starter, he had 101 tackles and 7 tackles for loss.
Yeah.
Led the team in one, was second on the team in the other. You can't dismiss that. There were some very good moments for JD.
Yes.
He made some first-year starter mistakes, but also I don't think in this defense he's a natural will. I think that lack of length hurts you more at will than it does Mike. Like Drew White rarely got in trouble because of his lack of length. At times he would get engulfed by blockers because he just wasn't a real big guy. That's going to be an issue for JD at times, but I think JD has more natural power than Drew does. I think he's stronger than Drew was. At least his hands are stronger. And so I think you kind of have that same issue at 2 spots. If you move JD to Mike, you really only have it in 1 spot. And then you've got a little bit more of a rotation because JD's not going to be on the field necessarily. Even if he wins the Mike job, he won't be on the field quite as much as he was last year because last year JD didn't really have anybody to rotate in with him. I mean, there really was no number 2 will.
Agreed.
And now you move him to Mike, and I think that there will be a rotation with him and Bo Bauer.
You could potentially keep Bo in the same role that he's been the last 2 years,
right? Because Bo's going to play. It's just is
he wouldn't have been asked back. He wouldn't have been asked back if he wasn't going to play. So I mean, it's understood that Bo's going to play, but I also don't think that he was promised the starting position either. I mean,
he definitely wasn't that. I mean, he understands that. But last year, J.D. Bertrand played 242 more snaps than Drew White, according to Pro Football Focus. I think if you can get in, so Drew White played 511, Bo Bauer played 354, and then some of Bo's snaps were on third down in the nickel, right?
Right.
So
does that count special teams too, or is
that
just
defense?
Okay, gotcha.
And so you kind of take some of Bo may get more snaps of Mike. JD's going to get less snaps, but I think that makes JD better. So as we look at the Mike position, less wear. The smaller you are at a power position, the more volume wears you down, right? Well, JD's not a big guy. If you can take 100 to 150 snaps off his body of work, I think that's going to make him even better because he's not going to wear down. I think he can play a little bit more disciplined, in my opinion, at Mike than he will because you've condensed the area he has to cover. The Will has to cover more ground than the Mike does, which I think helps JD, be more of a downhill guy.
Sure.
And then now you just got to work on cleaning up some of the tackling issues he had, right? But I mean, JD's missed tackles, a lot of times like in the backfield. If he would get better tackling, he's going to have 110 plus tackles. He's going to have 10 tackles for loss, and we're talking about, holy moly, this kid's got a chance to be a really, really good football player.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he's got to clean that up, though.
No question. And those are the things that people are going to remember, though. That a lot of times people aren't remembering the 100+ tackles; they're remembering the missed tackles.
Right.
And I get it.
And the struggles in coverage against Cincinnati and North Carolina.
I understand it. I mean that's what people remember. People don't remember Cam Hart being a really good corner because he wasn't tested and he wasn't beat. You know what I mean? So
some people do, right? But I get your point.
But you see what I'm saying. And I think that's a lot of what has to do with JD. I think he was super consistent for a really long time, but there were times that he struggled. And some of those times
teams got film on him, the more they could take advantage of him.
And a lot of those times it was in the open field where all eyes were on him.
Right. Or like in the backfield as well.
That's what I'm saying.
And I think as a Mike, you can protect him a little bit more in those areas. And so that's why I look at it. So, I mean, I look at it like, boy, a combination of J.D. Bertrand and Bo Bauer, to me, both a year older, is a bigger, more athletic duo than what you just had.
Agreed.
and I think a more productive duo than what you just had, because you had to protect. You couldn't play Drew a ton because he is a smaller guy, and I think he's a guy that had a lot of injuries early in his career. I think Drew White had a really nice career at Notre Dame, really nice career, and Drew was a solid player on some pretty good defenses.
Absolutely.
It's just when you got into the Bamas, when you got into the Cincinnatis, when you got into the Clemsons at times, like Drew just that was just a step above where he was, in my opinion. But even then, he tipped that ball against Clemson last year early in the ACC title game that, lets Kyle Hamilton pick it off. But then there were some issues where he kind of got caught up in the trash on some of those long runs and
that
things
would be
like that.
that would be my biggest gripe about Drew, is that he would get caught up in the wash a lot
because he was so short. His arms are so short that he just couldn't block destruct against at times the way you need him to. I mean, there were times against Bama where he got to where he needed to get to. It's like I remember the long run by Najee Harris in the Rose Bowl last year. I mean, Drew. I mean, it's called perfectly. The D line gets great push. Have to bounce the run. Drew's scraping. He knows where to go, but he hits that lineman, and he just couldn't. That guy was so long. He just kind of got on Drew's body, and Drew couldn't get him off.
Right.
And Najee bounces outside. A faster linebacker beats that lineman to the spot. A longer linebacker gets off that block, and it's at best a 3 to 4 yard gain.
Right.
Instead, it's a 40-yard gain. So those are the areas where I think, you want to see some improvement being made. And I think getting I don't think Notre Dame lacked athleticism last year, but I think the combination of athleticism and length issues, like the length, like Drew White's a good athlete. He's not an elite athlete by any stretch, but you can't be a good athlete and short. Sure. If you're going to be short, you got to be an elite athlete.
Right.
And I don't think that wasn't Drew, who did a lot of good things in Notre Dame. I mean, Drew did a lot of good things in Notre Dame. Captain, great kid, overcame a ton of adversity during his career, did some really nice things at Notre Dame. But it just, look, this is about competing for championships, right? And to me, that's where you've just got to get a little bit better there. I don't know if Bo Bauer and J.D. Bertrand are that duo, but I think it gets them closer.
Right.
In 2022.
I think that might be the duo for this year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think moving forward, as some of these guys get a little bit more experience and things, maybe you find some guys that have more of that length, have more of that athleticism. And I totally get that. But I think for 22, as I sit here today on January 20th, in my head, I'm thinking your best bet at Mike this year is Bo,
of what we know,
and JD. Of what we know.
In the back of your mind, you're saying, man, I hope Junior can beat these guys out. Or, man, I hope Burnham can beat these guys out. Because those are the guys with the really high ceilings. I mean, look, Junior is going to be bigger than Bo Bauer or J.D. Bertrand the second he steps foot on campus, which was last week.
Crazy.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Josh Burnham, by the time his freshman year arrives, is probably going to be way more than Bo Bauer.
Yeah.
And the phrase that the phrase I'm going to use for him. Guy's a flipping pterodactyl. I mean, I even a guy from Georgia that I know covers Georgia who tends to always underrate Notre Dame. He just thinks any kid that's not from the South or isn't going to the SEC sucks.
Of course.
That's just how this guy is. Good guy. But first thing he's like, dude, this Burnham kid is a freak. Right? Like, I'm like, okay, wow. Like, coming from you, that says something, because and he has no problem telling me that Notre Dame sucks. And I mean, he's not some guy that's like trying to tell me something to make me happy. He has no problem telling me that everyone at Notre Dame sucks. And, so for him to be like, dude, this Burnham guy is a freak. I mean, that, lengthwise, athletically, like, he's that first guy off the bus guy. This is what we've been telling people. Like, this kid's different. Well, they don't really have that. You know what I mean? And so that's in the back of your mind. You don't think Josh is going to be ready mechanically.
Right.
I don't know if Junior's going to be ready, but you're hoping they are, because that's the future of Mike, is one of those two guys. Now, Josh can play Mike, Will, Viper. Josh can do a lot of things.
Sure.
For Burnham, it's going to be, he's going to play, well, where's Josh Burnham going to play? The position that gets him on the field the fastest.
Well, and
right? That's where it's going to be.
that may be Will if JD moves
Right.
over to
It
Mike.
may be Mike. I mean, that's what we don't know.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I think the backup Will could potentially be a wide open spot.
Yes, but I think I'm talking more down the line as a starter.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Because
So,
the
like,
reality is Maris still has multiple. I mean, Maris,
Sure.
redshirted in 2019. 2020 was the COVID year. Maris was technically a redshirt freshman this year. So he still has 3 years of eligibility left. So he's not necessarily going anywhere.
Right.
So what I'm referring to, and the reason I'm talking about Josh as a Mike, is barring now, if Maris gets hurt again, now it's Prince and Jalen and Josh Burnham are battling for the starting job at Will, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I wouldn't move JD back over. I'd keep him.
Okay.
Again, we don't know that JD's going to move to Mike.
We're speculating.
This is
on
us
that. Yeah,
speculating,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah,
This is
right.
what we think that they should do. I have a feel. I wouldn't be shocked if JD starts at Will in the spring just to give Maris time to get caught back up. But honestly, I just would make the move now and put JD at Mike and say, Maris, we're going to get you. But then that opens up more. If you move him now,
right,
you can't give Maris all those reps because he's still coming
Exactly.
back from an injury, which means Prince Colley's going to get more reps, which means
Right.
Burnham and Jalen Snead are going to get more reps. And to me, that's why I would do it right now. But I think that if they move JD, it's going to take moderate level of, normal improvement for him and Bo Bauer, just moderate improvement that you make from one year to the next, normal next year level improvement to make this definitely a more productive, more physical, better run defending Mike lineup than what it was last year. That's my opinion. And that's a positive because you need to be better at Mike. And, Drew was good. Again, when we say better, we're talking about meaning beating the best of the best.
Sure.
Drew White was a good football player at Notre Dame. And I'm saying this because I'm hearing myself talk and I'm thinking, man, I'm sounding real super negative about Drew.
Yeah, it sounds like we're banging on Drew.
And it's not, because Drew's a good football player at Notre Dame.
Right.
But we're saying the standard is to win a championship.
Sure.
And I just don't think Drew was that guy. Drew was a good football player. He had almost about 200 tackles in his career, had 80 in 2019, had over 50 each of the last 2 years. I still remember him stepping in against Navy in 2018. Remember when Drew Tranquil got hurt? Drew White stepped in the mix, played really well that game. So I love Drew White. It's just, again, that standard for winning a championship, we saw from Drew against Oklahoma State, against Bama last year, against Clemson in the ACC title game. When he was playing against the best of the best, he just wasn't quite what you needed him to be. And that doesn't mean he wasn't a heck of a player and you don't love him and great leader and all that kind of stuff. It just means
football.
That's the standard at Notre Dame.
Analysis.
You need to have a Manti, a Jalen, an Owusu. You want those guys. You need those guys because that's what Bama's going to have. That's what Georgia's going to have. That's what Clemson's going to have. No, not Ohio State. Their linebacker play was pretty bad last year. They need work. They need work. They don't have the guys coming back that Notre Dame has. That's why they needed that freshman class. Anyway, so I just feel like that's going to be an upgrade at Mike. If Maris is healthy, it's an upgrade at Will. There's the potential for the inside linebacker play to be much better this year than it was in 2021. And at the end of the day, Vince, they need it to be.
What you need
it has to be.
Exactly. Right.